Hey, thanks for coming to 1500ESPN.com. I'm Derek Wetmore, and this is Matthew Collar. We're at US Bank Stadium, even though it's kind of hard to tell hanging out in the suite. But the Vikings lost to the Colts in, I think, very surprising fashion, Matthew. We can get to that in a second. Two big things that we're going to have to talk about. The fact that the season's basically over, and what's next for Adrian Peterson. Let's start with Peterson because the math of the season can still be a little confusing. They could still finish 9-7, and as of this moment that we're recording this video, they're not mathematically dead, but their climb just got a lot steeper on Sunday with the dud that they laid here. Adrian Peterson, you wrote a column for 1500ESPN.com. Has he potentially played his last game as a member of the Vikings?
I don't think so. I think that he will come back and play against Green Bay because there is a shred of hope that they could somehow have everything go perfectly right and match up with the Vikings in the playoffs. I don't see that as a possibility, really. I mean, it's down to percentage points. But because of that, and because he wants an opportunity to show that he can still play and potentially go out on good terms with the Minnesota Vikings and the Minnesota Vikings fans, the organization, his teammates, because he cares about that. I think he's been painted as a selfish player probably for a good chunk of his career. But even then, wouldn't you think Peterson would still care about how he's viewed long-term and the potential that the Vikings will bring him back because they'll be the highest bidder? I think he wants to prove to them that he still belongs in the lineup, that he's a guy that they should pay to come back next year. Even if they cut him, but at least restructure his contract, and playing the last two games gives him that chance. And even if he doesn't play well, then he goes out with, hey, at least he didn't just give up on his teammates and walk away. Once you come back, you got to play all three games or play none.
6 carries for 22 yards and a fumble on Sunday against the Colts. Now, part of that, of course, he was only in for 12 snaps because the Vikings were down 17-0 before most of us had our computer and TweetDeck set up on Sunday. They just trailed from the onset, and it got ugly. Peterson's fumble contributed to that. But, man, it just didn't feel like the return of the king, right? It was just he was in there, and the Vikings never stood a chance. They couldn't get anything going on third down. The reason it's a conversation, though, the reason it's not blasphemous to even ask that, despite the fact that Peterson said after the game he will be there for the Packers game, so he said that for what it's worth. But the fact that he's coming off a big injury, this is a very, I'll call it perilous offseason for the Vikings. This is a huge decision for them with that big-time cap hit against the salary cap. There are clearly other spots of their team they need to address. So that's why the Peterson question, for me, gets a little bit hairy what they're going to do this offseason. When you mentioned restructuring and any of that stuff, we'll see if Peterson's even open to that.
From what we saw today, that fumble being basically the last play that you'll remember he was in for, more or less, ends up with 6 rushes for 22 yards, which is good, right? And on the play that he fumbles, he breaks out a little bit for you to think, oh, there it is. Yeah. There's Adrian Peterson doing a thing that Jerick McKinnon and Matt Asiata cannot do. And I still believe that Adrian Peterson has the talent, has the skill, has the commitment to his craft to be a very good running back. If you're not bringing back Adrian Peterson, it's not because he can't run anymore. It's because you believe that other players might fit in better, that if you had a better pass catcher out of the backfield, that might be better for Sam Bradford in this offense, and because you just don't want to deal with him being the star anymore. I think the star of this team now is Stephon Diggs on offense. I think he's probably going to go to the Pro Bowl and has established himself as one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And if they're going to play a West Coast offense where they're going to throw 100 times plus a year to Stephon Diggs, and that's how they want to run their offense, then needing 20 carries for Adrian Peterson plus every game just isn't really going to work out. And if you're Peterson too, you might be looking at this offensive line and saying, man, I might want to go play part-time for New England or Dallas or Oakland or somebody like that for my last shot at something big in my career, because here with this offensive line, it's going to be really tough to fix in the offseason. It just might not work out. It might not be the best choice for him to come back here. All these things are to be considered, but I thought we saw just enough of a flash of the old Adrian Peterson to go, he can still run. He can still run.
With that, was a 12 or 13-yard carry before he lost the fumble, you thought, you sort of leaned forward in your chair.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, there he is. Oh,
and
okay.
So it turns out, that's the play that ends the game for the Vikings, too. Yeah. I mean, this is like Adrian Peterson's career in one run. He does something spectacular, but fumbles at the end, and his team just can't recover well enough. And he's had a lot of key fumbles throughout his career. I mean, the one thing about Peterson, when it's all said and done, people will look at him as the greatest, one of the greatest running backs of all time. But there will always be buts to go along with it. Yeah, but the fumbles against New Orleans. Yeah, but the game against Seattle last year. Yeah, but the playoff stats.
Yeah, but he can't pass protect.
Yeah,
but he can't get passes out of the backfield.
Exactly. And he's got 2 more games. Maybe he'll play, maybe he won't. He said he's going to, but 2 weeks ago he said he wasn't going to.
That's right, yeah.
So maybe he will, maybe he won't. And I'll be interested to watch these last 2 games to see if it turns out that there's tension at the end and it goes out on a sour note, or if Adrian Peterson has a swan song that's very nice, a couple of more good games, or if he just says, sorry guys, I can't take the risk, I'm done, and then this is the way that it ends, which I think would be sad, but it's not the absolute worst case.
Yeah, very divisive issue, I'll say, as calming the waters here as the sports writer, I'll say there are a lot of, I'd say, merit to both sides of the argument. Do you bring him back? Do you just cut ties with him and say, hey, it was a great run, but that's a lot of money, and if you're not open to a restructure, we can't afford that on our salary cap. The Vikings have been very good with handling the salary cap in this current front office administration. Changing the gears, though, I do want to talk a little bit about the idea that the season basically ended today. I mean, for the Vikings, for all intents and purposes. I'm a relative newcomer, Matthew. I know you're new to Minnesota, but covered the Buffalo Bills for a long time. It is my 4th season covering the NFL.
This was very Billsy, by the way.
Yes, it was very Billsy. I have not seen a game like this. A game where the team clearly needed, I should say I have not covered a game like this.
Yeah.
A game where the team clearly needed to win and laid such an egg. I was frankly surprised. As Captain Munnerlyn said after the game, he was at a loss for words. He couldn't believe the fact that the stakes of this game were so high and the Vikings came out and played the way that they did. Is there anything you draw from your Bills time? I was like, yeah, this is pretty similar. I've seen this movie before.
Well, I have seen it many times where the Bills needed to win a game and they played like this, but explanations for it, those I don't have.
Yeah, no, neither did they.
This week, being in the locker room, I felt like this is about as loose as the team has been. They seemed like they were in good spirits after beating Jacksonville. Mike Zimmer had talked about how his effort going out there with the eye patch and all that had been inspiring to the team. And then to have this happen, to just not show up, to commit penalties like they did. Linval Joseph's penalty was one of the most mind-blowing, head-slapping, face-palming things. Yeah. Trying to hurdle the center is just so bizarre. And there were a few of those where you just went, what happened to this team? Yeah. What happened to the team that played well in Jacksonville last week to come out with a key win? I don't know if you can say, oh, well, they gave up on this, they gave up on that, they were distracted by Peterson. A lot of times those things write themselves after the fact.
Yeah,
I would have never guessed.
Right.
From being in the locker room all week and seeing the attitude of the players, I would have never, ever, ever guessed that they would come out and play a game like this. But part of it might have just been bad matchup. Andrew Luck with no Harrison Smith. Harrison Smith, in my mind, is the MVP of the defense. He's the best player on the defense. He's probably a top 10 NFL defensive player. And you take him out of the lineup and put in Anthony Harris against Andrew Luck, a clear top 10 NFL quarterback. It's a bad combination. But they struggled to stop the run, committing penalties, couldn't get anything going on offense. And I think they set a bad tone from the very start of the game, handing it to Peterson and then throwing him a pass right away. Forcing a pass to him. Clearly forcing a pass because the linebacker read the play, saw it was coming, or maybe it was the nickel cornerback, got out there and made the tackle, and it was like, oh, this is how it's going to be. We're going to force the ball to Adrian Peterson because he's back. And I didn't think that set a very good tone.
I agree but devil's advocate on your point that it's just a bad matchup. The Colts defense, not very good.
Oh, no.
And they were able to limit the Vikings in the first half. The game was over in the first half, right? I mean, at halftime, the scoreboard and the stat sheet was so heavily tilted in Indianapolis' favor that it was basically over. Frankly, I've never been so surprised by the outcome of a football game. Yeah. Not just the final score, but what was at stake and how the team played in light of that fact.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I was totally stunned to see the way that they came out. But speaking about the matchup and how bad Indianapolis' defense are. Sorry, this is like cliche land epic here, so I apologize for this. They're an NFL team. They are an NFL team with an NFL team with 6 wins, and we have seen this Vikings team offensively go against bad defenses time in and time out and done nothing. Sure. I mean, they went into Detroit and put up 13 points on Thanksgiving Day against a Detroit defense that wasn't very good. Since when is Dallas' defense any good? Dallas' biggest problem was their defense. This team they scored 15 against Dallas. We shouldn't expect them to come out and smoke Indianapolis. That didn't surprise me, that there were offensive issues. What stunned me was the defense being so poor, especially against the run game. Against the pass game, takes advantage early. Andrew Luck did of Anthony Harris. Of course you would. Anthony Harris is a backup. In fact, early in the season, he was 3rd string behind Jaron Kearse. And now he's starting for Harrison Smith, one of the best in the league. I mean, you're going to go right to that. So but it was stunning they couldn't get anywhere near him, and it was stunning that they would just smoke the Vikings defense. I expected more of a battle between Luck and the Vikings defense, as opposed to that.
I thought the Colts defense was not as good as Jacksonville's defense. And that the Vikings actually handled the Jaguars in a game they also needed to win. As some players said this week, the playoffs started last week for Minnesota. Yeah. And then week 2 of the playoffs, they just got trounced by basically a non-playoff team. Yeah. And
I think Chuck Pagano maybe saved his job on this day to come here with their season on the line too.
That's right.
And just beat the heck out of the Vikings. It makes it look from the outside like the players are still playing for Chuck Pagano, which is really Andrew Luck. I mean, oh my gosh, is he good?
He's good.
Just stop for a second. He is amazing.
Some great throws today. Amazing. You wouldn't expect most quarterbacks, most humans to make them.
He's been to an AFC championship and won 11 games his first couple of years, double-digit wins. And last year was tough for him. This year has been a great year for Andrew Luck. He's one of the best. And I think their front office and their coaching has held them back. But you saw it today. All the talent he has, escaping the pocket, making plays down the field, just dropping dimes over Anthony Harris's head and over Chad Greenway's head. I mean, those are tough throws, drops them right in. And he's got that aggressiveness and that confidence that maybe Sam Bradford lacked. This was a very Sam Bradford game, by the way. Bradford will totally avoid any sort of criticism for this game because it'll be about the defense, it'll be about AP. But where was Sam Bradford today? Once again, needing a big performance out of your quarterback. You need a game-winning drive. It hasn't been there. You need a big performance in a big game. Hasn't been there. But his quarterback rating was decent today, so congratulations on that. But, I mean, a lot of completions, not a lot of points. Sam Bradford's career right there.
I don't know. You lose by 150 points in a performance like that.
Scored 6.
Yeah, it's hard. For me, it's hard to pin it all on the quarterback.
I'm not pinning it all on that. I pin it mostly on the defense getting smoked by Andrew Luck. Fair. But 6 points, you were never given a chance.
That's right.
And you'll blame AP, but it's really only Peterson on one drive where they forced him the ball. Yeah, the rest of the time, that was not the case. I mean, Sam Bradford was really, really bad today. And that won't get talked about a whole lot. So I figured I would just throw that in there, that he ends up with a lot of completions, as he has all year, and performances that don't put up a lot of points on the board. And as they go forward, considering him as their quarterback, it's something to think about. It's something to think about depending on how Teddy Bridgewater comes back. But that's another video cast.
Yeah, another time. Maybe this offseason. We'll do lots of Peterson this offseason, I'm sure.
You think?
Yeah, I think we'll talk about it once or twice. More hot takes on the Purple Podcast today.
Certainly will
You'll have those, Matthew Collar, Ben Gessling, and Judd Zulgad. Find that on iTunes if you like Vikings coverage. Also, your Peterson columns on 1500ESPN.com. So
certainly is.
If you disagree with any of his points on Peterson, go find him on Twitter and yell at him in the @reply section. I know he's a big fan of that. It's a big...
I like engagement. Social media engagement. That's what it's called. I'm yelling at people.
At Matthew Collar, I'm at Derek Wetmore, but you don't want to follow me for this game. This was a dud. I am like Captain Munnerlyn, at a loss for words after this one. We'll see you in the middle of next week before heading out to Lambeau for the now not that exciting Vikings Packers matchup on Christmas Eve. We'll see you then.
See you then.